To some extent the image of mermaids is too romanticized due to the Disney cartoons. Here's why: practically everyone will be shocked seeing a monstrous beast instead of a gorgeous female sea creature. So, today we'll talk about the real-life cases when people faced mermaids. Let's dive into this. Transformation of a mermaid into humans. Maybe somebody here has watched the animated Disney cartoon. As the story goes, Ariel, the main hero of the series, becomes a human to unite with the love of her life. Probably, this cartoon is based on the true story, which occurred many centuries ago. Two stories from the Netherlands claim that mermaids could successfully live on land. In 1430, a group of girls in a boat found a mermaid, floundering in shallow, muddy waters. They successfully pulled the mermaid into the boat and took her home, where they dressed her in women's clothes. Despite all girls' attempts to make a mermaid a human, the mission didn't succeed, as it wasn't capable of speaking. A later story from the 1600s similarly told of a mermaid who was injured but nursed back to health. This time, the mission turned out to be more fruitful, as the mermaid was able to learn Dutch and eventually converted to Catholicism. What about you? Would you like to learn a mermaid to speak like a human? If yes, then don't lose your time and try to find it somewhere in sea waters. Not beautiful creatures. Most depictions of mermaids show them as beautiful, seductive women, basing on the tradition of sirens, who could lure sailors to their deaths. But in one 13th century Norwegian manuscript, mermen were described in the opposite way. Just like monsters, the monster is tall and of great size and rises straight out of the water, the text reads. It had shoulders like a man but no hands. No one has ever observed it closely enough to determine whether its body had scales like a fish or skin like a man. The monstrous creature was also a sign of doom. Whenever the monster showed itself, men always were sure that a storm would follow. Curious finding after tsunami. People, populating seashores, deal with tsunamis of little or large scale at least once. Here's why: they're used to finding lots of trash, bodies of sea creatures, and some other things on beaches after such natural cataclysms. But after the tsunami in the Indian Ocean in 2005, people managed to find one extraordinary thing, which they had never seen before. Literally, it was a mermaid. No one knows information about the origin of this creature. Where did it get from? Why did it die? Did it have gender? Now there are no answers, but probably the ocean will be researched much better in the future. The main thing is that only 5% of the ocean has been explored. Briefly speaking, even space and planets are better explored than the ocean, which is seen by lots of people on a daily basis. Such a poor knowledge is connected with the lack of technologies and high pressure on ocean depths. Dead mermaid. For unknown reasons, in most cases people find mermaids, which are already dead. The same happened at Lake Mutarikwi in Zimbabwe. The photos flooded the internet and scared lots of users, because no one wants to meet such creatures in real life. Notably, these places are notorious for mermaids attacks. Many laborers, operating on the Gokwe and Mutare Dam reservoirs, had stopped working there, as they were terrified of mermaids, drowning humans in the waters of the area. $1 million for a mermaid. The title sounds more like a fantasy than the true story or reminds of an attempt of clickbait. Nevertheless, it's the pure truth. So, let's start with the very beginning of the story. In 2009, residents of the Israeli city Kiryat Yam noticed a weird scene in the water. A group of mermaids swam towards the coast. But after that they were no more seen, even despite intensified attempts of locals to find them in the nearby laying territories. Here's why: the Kiryat Yam's authorities found an outstanding way to find the solution. It announced a prize of $1 million for the person who would give the proper report of the mermaids. According to the local mass media, mermaids still haven't been found. Mermaids as a tourist attraction. These mermaid-like creatures began to appear in Antwerp in the mid-16th century. Sailors called them Jenny Hannovers, and they sold the objects to tourists. The curious name may be an English translation of the French phrase Jean d'Anvers, or young person of Antwerp, where English sailors bought Jenny Hannovers. For centuries, Jenny Hannovers were visible proof that mermaid-like creatures lived in the ocean. But others saw them as proof of something darker. They were also called devilfish, and one tradition claimed they were enemies of Christ. Falling in love with a mermaid. Originally John Smith is famous for his voyages to America, its conquest and reclamation. But in 1614 he was just an ordinary sailor, one of the hundreds. He traveled a lot on a ship. Here's why there was a high risk of meeting mermaids. Unfortunately, fears realized and John Smith encountered a sea creature. In his words, he spotted the mermaid off the coast of Newfoundland. Smith was instantly entranced, musing that her long green hair imparted to her an original character that was by no means unattractive. The mermaid also had large eyes, a finely shaped nose, and well-formed ears. As Captain Smith gazed at the mermaid, he began to fall in love with her, until he realized that she was a fish from the waist down. Indeed, if you're interested in this story, you can get acquainted with it in detail, reading Edward Snow's book Incredible Mysteries and Legends of the Sea. Christopher Columbus Voyage. As the true sea traveler, Christopher Columbus had no choice but to meet mermaids during his voyages. On the 9th of January 1493 the famous Italian explorer was sailing near the Dominican Republic. It was Columbus' second voyage. While he was traveling on the Atlantic Ocean, he observed some very strange creatures, similar to what he previously saw off the coast of West Africa, mermaids. In his journal, Columbus describes the mermaids as not half as beautiful as they are painted, although they had a human appearance in the face. So, here's another proof that mermaids aren't wonderful female creatures at all, but awfully looking monsters. At the same time, some people believe that this story is nothing else than fake. It's believed that Christopher Columbus' encounter was actually the first ever written record of manatees, or, in the other words, sea cows in North America. However, this accident took place many centuries ago, and it's hardly possible to check out the data. 3 hours of watching mermaids. Usually mermaids are seen in the south and east, however, this case is an exception. In 1603, a mermaid was spotted off the coast of Wales, near Pendeen. A farmer named Thomas Reynold first spotted the creature to watch the mermaid for 3 hours. William Saunders, the famous scientist, examined Reynold and the other witnesses. The story was credible enough that in 1604 an image was created to depict the mermaid. It described her as a monstrous fish that appeared in the form of a woman from her waist upward. Human caught a mermaid. You must have heard that by the 18th century Europe established lots of colonies throughout the whole world, particularly in the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific. In fact, these places are famous for plants and animals that had never been seen in Europe. One of the exotic creatures was the mermaid, which painter Samuel Fallowers included in a 1718 drawing. Actually, Fallowers claimed that he caught a mermaid himself and brought her into his house. He then drew the picture of the mermaid from his first-hand observations. Fallowers reported that the mermaid lived in a container of water and squeaked like a mouse. After 4 days, the mermaid died of starvation, because she refused to eat. On the one hand, mermaids aren't humans at all, but such an awful attitude to them is inhuman. What do you think about that? This is the end of the top. Has your attitude changed after watching the video? Do you believe in mermaids' existence or just think that it's a myth and part of folklore? In fact, too many stories of seeing mermaids have been registered throughout the whole human history. So, no one knows whether it's true or fake. Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to like this video, type some comments and subscribe our channel. See you in the next video.